Good morning everybody, and welcome to the new webinar. My name is Lamia Saki. I'm one of the consultants, and I work for the region of Northern Africa and Middle East. And I work in several rehabilitation projects in cities for the World Bank in several countries of the region. So we are organizing the fifth webinar on inclusive cities for several millions of people in the world. And this webinar tries to draw on the lessons obtained from the different projects carried out in the field of this inclusive city. There are several organizations involved, and the idea is to have a documentary registry of the national programs and policies that will help rehabilitate the informal or irregular neighborhoods. The goal is to identify the policies and actions that work well, those that have not achieved good results, and why. I've been documenting the Tunisian and Moroccan experiences in this field, and I'm really happy to be here and to introduce you Mr. Lahlou Najib, with over 30 years of experience in this field. Mr. Lahlou has been member of the board in charge of guaranteeing the execution these kind of programs in the country. Mr. Lahlou has also been the director of the Direction of Social Housing in the ministry, the Moroccan Ministry for Urbanism, and he's going to be analyzing the Cities Without Slums Program in Morocco, and they try to introduce a new approach using the participation and good governance principles. The presentation will be focused on the main aspects of this program, how it was executed, and the results obtained, as well as the long-term outlook for the program. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lahlou for his presentation. To say that I really enjoy, and I am very pleased to have the opportunity to participate in this webinar organized by the World Bank, and I hope that these lessons that I'm going to share with you will be useful for other countries and other experiences. This is the Cities Without Slums program. I am going to start with a general presentation of Morocco and the situation, general context. Then I'm going to talk about the background and the design of the project we have. Then I will also talk about some of the figures. And I will end up with some recommendations about how to continue this program. So, with regards to the presentation of Morocco, for those who do not know, Morocco is placed in northern Africa. It has a total area of about 710,000 square kilometers. The capital city is Rabat. The country is organized in 16 different economic regions with a total population of 33 million and a urban population of 20 million. The rate of urbanization was in 1960 of about 30%. Then in 2004 it was of 56%, and for the year 2020 the outlook is for it to reach 65%. The urban structure is very important, with 350 municipalities and urban communes, and there are 7 cities with over 500,000 inhabitants, therefore big cities, and there are about 10 million of inhabitants living on coastal areas. So the housing sector characteristics are the following. There are important factors like, for example, an important deficit estimated at about 840,000 units, with an estimated increase in the needs of about 125,000 units per year. There are many families living together, and we also see an important population living in unregulated neighborhoods in the outskirts of the city. So those out of these 125,000 units per year that are necessary, 60% of them are for social needs. There is also an important production of dwellings, although it does not respond to the needs. About 100,000 units produced in an organized way, and about 50,000 in a non-regular production or a spontaneous production, so organized by the households directly. And this is mainly in the outskirts of the cities. Taking into account this situation, the government decided to carry out a policy based on the following principles. First, an access to home ownership, because minimum rental housing, and through the provision of housing land. With the use of some houses that were developed by public developers, we see that way the need for funding is less. So the land development is one of the principles used. Then there is self-construction. This is more suited to households depending on their income and their ability to pay. This is therefore adapted to each household, and at the same time, this allows to adjust the housing problem and improve the incomes of households, because in most cases we're talking about two-family dwellings with several floors, and then the possibility of having 2 floors with 2 families, and then rent the lower floor. Finally, we have what we call the equalization, and the idea is to compensate the deficit as a result of sale of housing lots. And this way, we can ensure also the social diversity and inclusion of populations. The clearance of slums has always been a priority for the government. There are many programs and projects that have been developed in this field, and therefore Morocco has been able to accumulate long experience in this field, as well as learning from international cases. We have also created a specialized public body for this program, and with this clearance program, we've also been able to receive the support from several international organizations like the World Bank, USAID, and the French Agency for Development, among others. These policies have been quite positive because we've been able to reduce the number of inhabitants of the slums to, let's say, acceptable or better rates at least. But the fact is that these previous policies lacked an comprehensive approach. Most of them were carried out depending on the specific needs identified or a demand on the part of local authorities and elected officials. So I was saying that Morocco has always considered that there was a real need to improve the situation in slums, and therefore, in August 2001, there were some royal instructions in order to set up a global action plan and guarantee long-term resources that would be available. And in July 2004, the official program Cities Without Slums was prepared with the relevant ministries, the local authorities, and elected officials. Therefore, the idea was to work at the global level with the city, and the program was going to involve the local partners too. 81 cities and urban areas were involved with 270,000 households. So the implementation of the program was carried out on the basis of a contract agreed between the state, the local authorities, and elected officials, defining the number of households involved, the deadlines for the implementation, the date when the city would be declared a city without slums, the obligation in order to carry out a monitoring and sanctioning of the new settlements. The funding is guaranteed by the state through the use of a specific fund, the Solidarity Fund for Housing, and this fund is created thanks to the application of a parafixal charge on cement. And thanks to this, the Ministry for Housing could obtain funds to guarantee the development of the program. So the more cement is used, the greater amount is collected thanks to this tax. Since the launching of this program, the consumption of cement in Morocco has gone from 8 tons to 14 tons, which implies an increase in the funds available. So there's also this FOGARIM that has been created, a fund in order to guarantee a loan to households with irregular and low revenues. And thanks to this bank credit, we can offer 80% of the total amount. There's also the use of microcredits. And this has been extended also to social housing. So the operating modes, there are several options. 3 of them. First of all, restructuring. And this means maintaining the populations on site and building the infrastructure facilities and carrying out a land regularization. This is a very positive approach because the population may stay where they live, but it is not always possible to use this type of option within the program, because there's been an increase of the population in the slums and there's been a reduction in the plots of land available. So after the restructuring, it is very difficult to authorize the building of new plots. Then there's also the relocation option, which implies moving people to apartments mainly, and also in some cases, although less frequent, There's the possibility of using a credit that will be guaranteed by the state, and this is not always possible because these inhabitants' revenues are in general low and also irregular. So there's another option that we use very often. This is the resettlement, and it consists of the following. There's the assignment of new plots with a self-built housing project supervised by an architect. This allows for the families to build depending on their needs and their funds available, but the inconvenience is that we have the feeling that this is constantly on works. Several supporting measures have been offered, like master social housing, involving the households in the project design, the implementation, and post-occupation phases also. And there are also prevention programs in order to meet the new needs of households and avoid the creation of new slums in general. So, here we can see the indicators. We've been able to increase the rhythm of demolition of slums, going to 5,000 to 25,000 units per year. And we've also been able to reduce the slum population, which was of 8.2% in 2004. And this is percentages over the urban population as total, and we've been able to bring this percentage down to 3.9%. 48 cities and urban towns have been declared without slums. This represents about 229,000 households that have benefited from this program, so over 1 million people. There are still 146,000 remaining slums to be addressed, about 74,000 which are already under development, and 71,000 for whom we still need to define and plan actions. What about the constraints and obstacles? First of all, there was a slow mobilization on the part of some of the local partners. And in the areas where the mobilization has been slower, the results have also been slower. The elected officials are not always willing to support these kinds of interventions. In some cases, there has been a delay in the mobilization of public land, and this is essential. And this is also very important. Another element was the synergy between the different stakeholders, not always effective and efficient. And the social support was not always adequate. And the neighborhoods associations were very essential. Sometimes there was a weak inclusion of their participation in the designing of the program, and that was a problem. The lack of sanction and monitoring programs meant that there was an increase in the number of targeted households. The scarcity of prevention programs was also a negative aspect. And if there is a new slum that is created, then we need to find funds again to do this slum clearance. So also with regards to the prevention programs, this is essential. We need to offer cheap housing, adapted housing. Well, apart from these obstacles, there are nevertheless some success stories that I would like to highlight. First of all, with regards to the lack of funding, we've found out that there is a way out of this problem using the third sector, so a small property developer who would be in charge of the building on the plot, so 3 floors and a ground floor. So that way we can have 3 apartments and then the ground floor for commercial uses. This way we can solve the funding problem, as we do not need to use bank loans, and thanks to this we can also accelerate the valorization rhythm and improve the quality of the implementation. And it is also important because these developers are professional developers, although not big companies. This option was available mainly in big cities, but in smaller cities we needed to use other formula as the private developers were not interested in participating. Positive experience was that of the creation of social facilities. Sometimes the people that were relocated, they were taken very far away from schools or other infrastructures, and this led to problems in terms of safety, transportation, and other needs. So it is important to install all these social facilities with funding coming from the Solidarity Fund for Housing, and this must be done before the building of the houses, of the social housing, or at the same time. This way we can accelerate the transferring of households, and also we guarantee, of course, that all the infrastructures and equipment will be available for these inhabitants. And this also ensures the inclusion of families after the relocation. We also found that the involvement of neighborhood associations and NGOs was key, especially the participation in the design and implementation of the program. This sometimes leads to some problems, especially in the case of blended families, for example. Families where we have, for example, a couple and a son that is, or a child that is from a previous marriage. And we have some problems with the census of the population. So the fact of getting the neighborhood associations and NGOs involved in the project was a way of ensuring a transparency of the procedures and solve this kind of problems. We could prevent conflicts and settle disputes in this sense, in order to determine who was going to be a beneficiary of the project and who wasn't. As a conclusion, we can say that slums are the most hideous manifestation of social deficit, but nevertheless, the persistence of unemployment, poverty, and urban exclusion are precisely what lead to the creation of slums and other forms of substandard housing. So we need to solve those problems in order to avoid the creation of slums. We see similar cases in developed countries because of the crisis, with the increase of unemployment. And this is after several decades of lack of slums. So when the Cities Without Slums program was launched, we wanted to limit the existence of slum households to a residual rate. The main goal is to be able to relocate the greatest number of households as possible and really have the minimum rate of slum dwellers as possible. Of course, we need to promote jobs, the job creation, and we try to limit both unemployment and slum dwellers to a percentage that would be very limited. And for this, these kind of social programs are essential. We need to maintain the Cities Without Slums programs, but also we need to create other programs in order to target those social problems that lead to the creation of slums. We will need to develop a new generation of partnerships between the state and the local authorities and the civil society. And we should also try to include reduction and prevention programs in the urban policies, especially in the big cities like Rabat, Tanger, Casablanca, and so on. At the same time, this Cities Without Slums program should be applied in a more general way and integrated into a global approach of the cities, so that we can cover the whole of the population involved. And thanks to this, or in order to do this, we rather need to involve all the different stakeholders.
At the same time, we hope to take into consideration this phenomenon, and we hope to provide solutions to the issue at stake. Thank you very much. I hope I haven't been too long, and I'm available for any questions you might have in relation to all of the information which we have discussed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monsieur Lahlou. Thank you very much for your presentation, which you've just given. It was enriching despite the connection problems. And it's interesting to see that we have a very innovative program since its conception, based on involving the heads of cities and based on a lasting source of financing. This program gave very important results on the ground. I'm going to now pass the floor to Mr. Jaffaliar, a specialist at the World Bank who works in the Middle East and African region in the bank. He has over 25 years of professional experience in the region. He has worked on topics of decentralization and on supplying municipal services. He currently manages the implementation of investment projects geared at responding to the needs of certain cities and thus responds to their development needs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lahlou, for that fantastic presentation. The topic is very important for Morocco. Morocco is no exception on this issue. This problem is known worldwide in both developing countries and in developed countries. This issue always exists where we see social exclusion in these slum districts, and this is translated into a certain number of phenomena, be it social phenomena or economic phenomena. This is often linked to violence and a lack of inclusion. If I've understood correctly, this program is quite young because it began in 2004. It is only 10 years of age, therefore. The objectives and targets have been well quantified. The slums have been well evaluated, and I think that the problem-based approach followed by Morocco and by Moroccan authorities is quite interesting, given that it offers flexibility in terms of this program, and also because it opens the way for participation of different actors, be it on a local level or on a national or regional level. I will begin with 2 observations, and then I will move on to specific questions. The public who are listening from different corners of the world might have some questions and comments, and we will listen to those also. Firstly, I would like to have more information on whether or not this program, when it was launched, was focusing solely on curing the problem. Has it been implemented alongside a will for preventing the problem, be it in terms of larger urban policies? My second question, or general comment, I understand that this is a national program, so it's a national priority. I've understood that the government has implemented all necessary instruments for its implementation, be it financial, be it partnerships and contracts, and I wonder if the key actor in all of what is supply and demand in terms of housing and the imbalance which may exist between supply and demand in housing, particularly when we look at weak income household or low income households, must the city not have a more significant role in terms of urban planning, in terms of mobilizing the landowners? Is this a key element at the basis of all of these housing problems for these slums? Oftentimes the availability of land or space is a problem. Is the city the planning agent, and is the city responsible for ensuring that this supply-demand balance remains equal? Particularly when we look at cities which are progressing and cities which aren't progressing. Some cities will opt for the cheapest option available, and oftentimes that is slums. My third comment, I noted the aspect of social inclusion which you mentioned. You tackled this by looking at social amenities. That's a very positive element within this program, but I wonder how, in the framework of implementing this program, the population the beneficiaries, the inhabitants of these slum towns, how have they been associated in the conception of the supply which the government is offering them, or in the implementation of these programs, or in the maintenance of these programs in terms of existing housing? Finally, a quite general element, what has the government implemented? Is there a monitoring and assessment system to measure progress in the framework of implementing the program, and in order to be able to connect the necessary information to the demands which exist? This program began in 2004. Work began, and during a 10-year period, do we now have a successful monitoring system in place? Two specific questions, and then I will allow the other speakers to intervene. You spoke about a very interesting instrument for the cities, which is develops a partnership based on consensus and contractualization. Is this city contract successful? Has it allowed cities to participate in the implementation of this program? Finally, a last question concerns the case of Casa. You spoke about the third-party participation in that regard. This initiative is quite interesting in my opinion. Do you think it has an opportunity to be implemented in other cities in Morocco? I will stop there, and I would like to thank you once more for your fantastic presentation and for your exchange on the concept of the results of this program in Morocco. Thank you. So shall I continue, or shall I await for questions? I think you can answer those questions, and then if we have more time, we might take more questions. Okay. Thank you very much for your comments and for your very pertinent questions. This subject is crucial for us, and as you said, we're not the only countries in this situation. Many other countries are facing the same situation, not just developing countries, but also developed countries, where we have seen a reappearance of some slum districts. In relation to your first comment, the issue of prevention, as I said, this program is quite innovative. And has taken on board previous programs. The policy of reducing slums is a curative policy. It aims to address the problem of people who are already living in slum districts. We also have low property value housing, low cost housing, which is set by the state. It can be set by private or public property developers as part of a partnership. This system offers a product which can be obtained by households with low incomes and avoids a situation whereby these people would live in slum districts. The price is determined by the value of housing in large towns. Obviously, this is a significant investment for the parties concerned, and this allows us to have a certain number of slum districts and to keep these at a minimum level. And this has positive results because we've seen a decrease from 8.2 to less than 4% of the urban population living in slums, as I mentioned. Your first question looked at the contracts between local authorities. This is an innovation, and this involves having contracts on the whole territory of a city, and this will take into account all of the slums in question, and it also involves local representatives in the conception and implementation of the program. I call this a consensual contract because everything is negotiated before any signature occurs. The number of houses involved, the number of inhabitants, the land in question, all of the different aspects are taken into account. Local authorities are also involved, and some cities overnight had no slums left in their cities as a result of this program. We must say that housing involves a transfer of the population from the slum districts to sites for housing, for alternative housing. Often this involves a lot of administration, and there are political issues behind these operations which mean that things are not always as simple as they might seem. It's impossible or very difficult to leave people in one area. The difficulty of involving local authorities is based on the global policy of the state to try to decentralize the responsibilities to the local authorities. This is a progressive approach which is only being implemented at the moment. We are waiting for the state to become directly involved in this program, and we think it's one of the key responsibilities of the state to be able to intervene in this type of program. In terms of social inclusion and the association of populations in the conception, implementation, and realization of this program, this has been possible in some cases, but not systematically. And this is because of a lack of expertise and specialized agencies in these domains. Also, there are contradictions between the social aspect and the implementation of the plan. All participation requires discussion, and certain timeframes must be respected for the implementation of the plan. Therefore, it's important to find a good balance between the participation of populations and other stakeholders. We know that time is a very important factor because the more time that passes, the population living in these slum districts increases. The exodus, the rural exodus which is occurring, is increasing. People move from the town, from the countryside to the towns. So we need to act quickly, and we need to do more than we are currently doing to ensure that we can reabsorb the deficit and face up to any eventual increase in the population in these areas. In terms of monitoring and assessment, there are committees in place. These work well in some cases and less well in other cases. We have local committees, we have committees headed by the local prefectures, and we have a national committee which is presided by the head of the government and by the different ministries concerned. They monitor the program and they assess the outcome of the program. Obviously, this concerns the Ministry for Housing. There are inspections led by regional heads, and regular reporting must take place to document the situation and to assess the state of progress of the plan. A company was especially created for Casablanca, and that was significant because Casablanca represents the beginning of slum towns in Morocco, and almost half of the program was carried out there. Then there are also a sector with different groups who are also involved in the assessment, and these operators provide information and ensure that monitoring takes place successfully. In this way, we know where we are in terms of the implementation of the program and in terms of the reduction of slum districts and of cities without slums. And we are also aware of the needs of providing more complementary programs in order to tackle these increases in population. This year is the 10th year of the program, and this coincides with the general census of population and housing. This census takes place every 10 years. In 2014, we will have this census once again, a census of the population and housing, and this will give us figures which are useful in relation to the state of affairs, and I hope we will be happily surprised by the results. In large cities where we see programs which have been implemented for some time now, these programs are now quite advanced and are well implemented at this point. Just one word. When we look at the value of land, we must look at property developers, because the property developers must be able to find value also. So it's a bit difficult to implement these programs when we're looking at cities with low incomes. So we need to find other methods for financing, and we can use a guarantee fund for this, or we could form partnerships different to that of Casablanca, which is a very particular case. Thank you very much. I just have two questions before we close the webinar session. We have a little under 10 minutes left. Perhaps very quickly, I think that Amalan mentioned a study. Maybe we could get to know more the idea of the population and the beneficiaries in relation to the Cities Without Slums program. Sometimes these people are far from their neighborhood and the amenities are far from where they live. So how do these people perceive the new programs? A second question. Has the Arab Spring movement changed the situation in any way? Have there been any new developments in terms of the program in the current context? And once again, I would like to thank you for your presentation and for the exchanges you have allowed us to have. I will pass the floor to you now, and then we will have to close the session in under 10 minutes. Okay, I will speak less than 10 minutes, don't worry. This study has taken place on many different slum districts. We have looked at some which have been financed by the French Development Agency. We have had an investigation to see the state of progress of the program and to see how people use these new spaces, use their new housing, and use their new neighborhoods. Certainly, it's not always a success in that sometimes the new amenities and areas are far from the city centre, and obviously this poses problems of transport, but essentially the issue of creating amenities involves, in the first program, people were rehoused. In the new program, we are allowing for more infrastructure and amenities, basic amenities, so that people can, for example, send their children to the local school, so that people can have businesses nearby, so that they can go to the bakery, etc. This will ensure that the neighborhoods which we are creating are more sustainable and allow these people to live in these areas more easily. And it also ensures that they will have means of transport. So the collaboration of these people, therefore, is significant, particularly at a local level. It is important to have neighbourhood associations involved and to have local authorities involved in order to ensure that conditions are better for integration and to avoid any kind of neglect of the new amenities, to avoid a situation whereby people don't want to use the new amenities. So we want to move on beyond these constraints. It is also necessary to have a new generation of local contracts so that we can take charge of these and look at these elements which might have been neglected in the first contract in 2004. Now, in terms of the Arab Spring movement, the program was launched a long time before this. The elements such as unemployment, etc., were present. And the Spring movement is a manifestation of all of these social issues. Housing is one of the fundamental rights for people to be able to live, to work, etc., and to contribute to stability in their household, to stability in their neighborhood and in their city. Housing is necessary, but is not entirely sufficient if people are not able to obtain employment and to be included socially in their society. Then this can cause problems also. in order to avoid any situations of conflict which some neighbourhoods experience, we could address this. In the last slides, I had showed some images where we see two photos in Casablanca, and we see on the one side a large group of people who were completely reabsorbed into alternative housing. So we can create housing units for households. And this is a sign that things are, in my opinion, changing in the positive sense in terms of urbanization and sharing a vision of the future for the city. That's it. I hope I haven't spoken for too long. I would like to thank you for letting me speak today. It's been a great pleasure to participate with you, and I hope that, as I said, this might allow us to exchange our experiences and to enrich each other and to achieve greater results for the populations who are living in these difficult situations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lahlou. On behalf of the World Bank Institute team, I will see you very soon for the next session, for the webinar on inclusive cities. Yes, you will. Goodbye.